As she said, this is being brought to you by the Partnership Development Team, which is part of Member Care and Resources. And I think it's the first time we've hosted a webinar with 3 different participants in 3 different locations. So welcome to you. Just a couple housekeeping items. She's already covered the question and answer period, which we'll hope to save until the end of the last 10 minutes. And there'll be an FAQ put together. So if we don't get to your question in the time allotted, rest assured it will be included in the FAQ. I'm going to spend about the first 10 minutes doing what I call setting the stage. I have to move fairly quickly through that in order to get to the main material about integrating appeal letters and follow-up calls into your invitation to partnership strategy. As she said, I'm Mike Osborne. I'm a PD coach and have been in this role for about 10 months now, but have had a bit of history in development work prior to that. So I'm going to minimize this window, as you can see my desktop with the little pictures on it, and if you'd like to do the same, feel free. It just keep you from being distracted by my face and my hand expressions. So from my perspective, part of setting the stage is realizing that partnership development and nurture is a part of biblical stewardship. We all take a similar role in stewarding 3 things: relationships, those that God gives us, the people on our teams or contacts that we have through our mailing list or whatever venue you choose to keep track of them with. Those are there on purpose. God stewards relationships to us throughout our lifetimes. We steward prayers and should be faithful in our prayer life, and we steward the financial resources that God brings our way also. The first thing I want to share is kind of the center part of the 7 key areas in partnership development. So I'm going to bring up a different screen here. There it is. I just want to briefly focus on this center section because it's so foundational to what we do in partnership development. Of course, the centerpiece is our relationship with God, and He receives the praise and the blessing and the glory for the testimony that we give through building our partnership teams. Prayer is an essential component. And if I were to make a shift or a small change in this, it would be calling it an attitude of generosity. We should have hearts of generous giving. We should be in the Word frequently and have lives of integrity. And the other 7 key components kind of revolve around that, work from that. And I thought it was important enough to include it early on here in the presentation. And as I get familiar with navigating here, I want to go back to my desktop and not have to start from the beginning each time. Okay, the next thing I like to encourage people to do beyond those key foundational things on the 7 key areas is make sure that you're, of course, founded on prayer and God's Word. And the favorite passage of mine is Psalm 19:14. And you should have, I think, some key scripture passages with you at the ready, memorized at all times. This is, may the words of my mouth and meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight. Okay, getting into the HOV lane. This is often an analogy new to some people as I meet with clients here at the JAR Center. As you know, in most major metropolitan areas, in order to get to your destination faster, you need to have an accountability partner with you, somebody else in the front seat, and you get into an HOV lane. Well, in this context, it stands for honesty, openness, and vulnerability. And I believe that we need to have that with the prayer and provision partners that come along our side. And that means that when you write, when you talk on the phone, when you have face-to-face presentations, just being really authentic and open and trusting that they're going to build trust in you because you're doing that. So when I mention being in the HOV lane, it stands for honesty, openness, and vulnerability. The next three things that I, as a PD coach, encourage my clients to do in their communication is to realize that they are informing, they're inspiring, and then they're inviting others to join them. And that's some of the precepts as we look at the appeal letters. Remember that you are in the process of informing. Different people are in different places in their knowledge of who you are and what you're doing in ministry. Inspire them to participate, to take an active part, and also invite them to join your team. I think that is essential to building a solid prayer and provision team. So what doesn't work and what does? Well, if you haven't realized yet, a few newsletters and or infrequent communication doesn't work anymore. There used to be a time, maybe more than 10 years ago, when a few newsletters a year, especially if you were overseas, people would understand and that would be okay. But in today's cultural context, especially if you're state-based and even if you're in a foreign-based ministry, just a few newsletters and or infrequent communication does not work. And we've moved from full information and no solicitation to full information and a gracious invitation. My wife and I joined Wycliffe 6 years ago. I think we were in equipped number 5, and that transition had already begun to take place. But when we went into full-time supported missionary service, we came in, prior to joining Wycliffe, we came in under this model of providing full information and extending an ask, a gracious invitation. And I know for some established members that is a big shift. They have not had to do that, and now with new ministry budgets or they find themselves a little behind in their PD level, that's a whole new element to coach through. And I like using the example of Tigger versus Eeyore. I hope you can see what that says there on the screen with Eeyore kind of bashfully turned aside. For some reason, I'm always getting forgotten. And that's often the way it is with missionaries if they're not frequently informing and inspiring and inviting people to join them. And what Tigger does, he's upbeat and happy, and he says, turn that frown upside down. And that's, of course, Tigger is more of a type A personality, is just out there telling the story all the time. And in some contexts, we can all be like that. We need to be excited and passionate about what God has called us to do and our part in it. Then I'd like to encourage you to have our takeaway number 1 is what I call the sentence. And you should, if you don't have one, I'd like to encourage you to develop one. So it's I primarily do this and this. For example, I primarily help new Wycliffe missionaries get to their field of calling faster, and I help established members stay in their area of ministry longer and with less financial stress. It might be a little long, I could shorten it a little bit, but it's really intended to be about a 10-second snapshot of, well, this is what my activity within Wycliffe and Bible translation is about. And then as you have opportunity, it should spark some questions, a raised eyebrow, an interest in hearing more. So I encourage you to develop your sentence. What is your sentence? And then from that, you can unpack it and turn it easily into a 30-second module, 3-minute, 30-minute presentation. Also, part of setting the stage, takeaway number 2 is, are you ready to give testimony? Encourage you to have an up-to-date either ITP or a prayer response card, something personal with your picture on it that is Wycliffe branded that explains briefly what your role is and how people can join your team as you're inviting them. If you need more information on how to acquire those, contact partnership_development@wycliffe.org and PD coach will get a hold of you. Also, an up-to-date personal missionary page on wycliffe.org I think is very helpful and preferred, recommended. Another thing I encourage clients to use is an up-to-date 1-page bio. It's just a simple 8.5 by 11 sheet with a recent picture on it, and a paragraph or 2 about your background, your calling in the ministry, what your current role is, and I always include an invitation and the specific information on how they can join your team, either online or through sending in a mailed contribution to Wycliffe. Having an up-to-date PowerPoint and or video and or storybook, they all work in different settings. Now, being in a mobile context, even having something that you can bring up on your tablet or your phone. But don't be short of being ready to give a reason for the hope that you have in Christ. Another idea is to have a church presentation, or what I call ITP portfolio, simply a brochure or a folder that opens up with a cover letter and information about your ministry, the department you serve in, the impact it's going to have. And again, as the Lord puts you in circumstances where you can share that with churches or other groups, you're ready to do that. But the essential components in preparation for the meat of this webinar, using appeal letters and follow-up phone calls, is make sure that you're ready spiritually, that you're well-founded in scripture memorization and prayer, and you have to be organized. Have a focused, prioritized plan and a task list. It's helpful to use Donor Manager, TNT. I've heard about a new one called NPDX, I think, something that Crew is using. And it's out there and available. Whatever works for you, but as we get into this process, you're going to see pretty quickly that it's going to require some level of having a plan and being organized. So I want to remind you that we want to make invitations to partnership, that's ITPs, in the most personal way possible and practical. Now the reality is that with a lot of established members especially, your partners over time get real spread out. They're all over the country, maybe all over the world. And so face-to-face presentations becomes more difficult, more challenging, more expensive. And so, but we also want to emphasize that that is the best. If you can get in front of people and they can hear your voice and see your passion and your hand movements and your face, that's certainly preferred. But let's also take advantage of the tools that God has given us in video conferencing. We're right now on Zoom, and we're able to connect from around the United States, even around the world, as evidenced by Jen being in Dallas and Pat being in Orlando and me being here in Waxhaw. And you can do the same thing by connecting with friends and family, with church mission teams. We even did a Skype call when we were overseas in a scripture engagement project in the Torres Strait Islands, and we tapped in during a church service to a missions moment and had 5 minutes to give an update on what we were doing there in the Torres Strait Islands and the impact we were having. So I just really want to encourage you, the next most personal way behind face-to-face is video conferencing, and to take advantage of that tool. Now the next most personal way, believe it or not, is an appeal letter with follow-up calls, not an appeal letter sent by itself. What really makes it personal are follow-up calls and contacts, and that's what we're going to spend the rest of our time on. So the first thing I'd like you to consider is to segment or categorize the relationships that God has stewarded to you. And let me explain what I mean by that. Probably on your database or in your mailing list or contact list, there are those that are regular financial partners. It could be individuals, families, businesses, churches, and there might be some among that current financial partner list whom you don't feel comfortable asking for additional financial support from. And that's fine. That's natural and normal. But I would create that first segment and kind of cordon them on the side there, because they're going to receive particular kind of communication, preferably again in the most personal way. But I find that if you don't have an address, that might be an attachment to an email, but it's better if it were an appeal letter being sent in the mail. There's something about emails and newsletters in our culture. They've become mass communications. They're not seen as personally as they were even a few years ago. And I think you understand why. We're getting so many of them, and the spammers and the direct mailers have entered into that marketplace and have really made that medium less personal. So there's still something, at least in my context and with the folks that I'm coaching, still something special about getting a hand address envelope written to me personally. It stands apart. It's not a bill. It's not a some type of direct mail advertising. And I typically pay a little more attention to that. Then another section are those whom have said yes in the past. This is the second group. They're on your mailing list, contact list. They've been sporadic. Maybe they gave a one-time gift. But they're not regular financial partners, but then again, they've said yes to you and expressed interest at some time in the past. Now, there might be a group in between where they're regular financial partners, but you would be comfortable in appealing to them for additional financial support, and especially now with ministry budget increases. Now, you might approach them about the prospect of prayerfully considering a percentage increase. Let's say your ministry budget has gone up 15, 20%. Then the last group are those who need to be invited in a personal way to join your team. Maybe you're not even sure how they got on your list, where they came from. Just over the years, your mailing list has grown, and they're more of an acquaintance. You may know who they are. Then again, you may look at it and wonder, I wonder where they came from. But that's another group. Each of these segments or categories need to be communicated with in a different way to make it as personal as possible. And one of the things we'll touch on a little bit later is as you do communicate with people and you follow up with them, make sure and ask them how they prefer to be communicated with and in what frequency. We've been blessed with a variety of mediums today with things like Facebook, texting, phone calls, emails, even printed newsletters and so forth. Ask them what they like and how often. It's important to know your audience. So again, ITPs in the most personal way possible. We're going to now focus on personal appeal letters with follow-up calls and contacts, which I think was the reason you joined this webinar. And I'm going to share some examples and walk through those and talk about the specific things that work in a well-written appeal letter. So the first one that we're going to take a look at, and pardon me as I share the screen here, is a letter for that first group of people. They're financial partners. I'm not sure how to, I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so these are people that are financial partners, and you're not asking them for additional financial support. You're asking them as a partner to join you in prayer as you expand your ministry team. And so it starts off by describing the number of years you've been in ministry and different places where you've served. And it's good then to have a bolded sentence, a bolded headline as I call it, that announces some news, what your current role is, or if you're getting ready to enter into a new role, if you've been on furlough or changing assignments. It could be we have big news, our Wycliffe ministry budget is going up 15%. In this case, then you begin to build a case. You might explain what your role is and the impact it has. Then another headline is, we need to reach 100% of our Wycliffe ministry budget to continue in these ministries or in our current roles. Again, you're building a case, and I'll cover each one of these points a little bit further on in the presentation. But one thing that I want to make clear is, in this paragraph right here, under faithfully serving where planted, to this particular audience, you're saying we're affirming your faithful partnership with us. We are not asking you to increase your financial gifts to our Wycliffe ministry, but we'd like you to pray with us as we expand our partnership team and extend an invitation to others. We want to continue to influence people toward Christ through His Word. So you're making it clear that with this particular audience, you're affirming their partnership, you're asking them for prayer. I have found that in written form, even in emails, it is not a good idea to try to introduce referrals or talk about advocacy. That is best handled person to person, on the phone, face to face. Let me explain to you how you could serve as an advocate and how you can help introduce us to people that you know and have credibility with, but we don't know. And so, again, it's building upon this this foundation of the uniqueness that you have. You are uniquely called and qualified to serve, and there's a lot of flexibility in the text. There's even flexibility in the wording of the headlines, but the headlines help move the reader's eye down the page, and you're building your case. You're inspiring them to want to participate with you. But it's good to have a clear ask at the bottom of the first page, and that is, as you can see right here. And there's a couple different ways to phrase that. Would you pray for us as we ask others to join our team? Would you prayerfully consider joining our ministry team with Wycliffe? And you'll see a couple different samples of letters and how the phrasing is just a little bit different. And in this letter, again, it affirms those that are on your team. It helps explain how your budget is handled through Wycliffe. The reality, I think a lot of people don't realize that we don't receive 100% of our ministry funds, of those funds that go through Wycliffe. Well, and they may get the assessment part, the fact that 10% goes to home office support, but they may not realize that there's other deductions, retirement, insurance, other things that come out, taxes. And you probably only live on, take-home pay is only a percentage of the budget. I think it's good to inform people about that, and that your budget is very similar to what they might be living on, and that paragraph explains that. Again, it almost presumes that they're going, in this letter, that it not only presumes, it states again that they're part of your existing team, they're giving to a lasting work, and again, appreciate your prayers. I always like to leave a PS in letters. It again emphasizes what your goal is. Pray for us in this context as we expand our team with Wycliffe. So that's the first example of an appeal letter. Well, that's actually what we call an affirm and request for prayer letter. So let me move on to the second group. This is what I've referred to as a renew or reconsider letter. So it's written just a little bit differently. Notice the pattern bar and the Wycliffe logo at the top. That is the preferred way in which to show up in the front that you're with Wycliffe. We worked with the marketing department, and this was what they suggested that we use. I know some people like to use the Wycliffe logo just in the top right-hand side. If you go to the PD resources page under Unity, there is a button for Wycliffe branding, and click on that, and you'll see all of the recommended logos, pattern bars, colors, and so forth. So in this letter, the makeup is similar, but the wording is a little bit different. And I've actually used another client's actual letter as an example. In this case, they introduce themselves, remind the audience that they've been with Wycliffe for 20 years. They've served in West Asia, here in U.S., and in this case, they're at GIAL in Dallas. And here's their headline: we need to expand our partnership team, reach 100% of our Wycliffe ministry budget. Then it builds the case. It explains how the word GIAL and the recipient are a team. They work together. And they're launching what they call an every language campaign. We want to bring people from every language group home to Christ and to their God-given identity and purpose. What a great privilege. Now again, the audience here are those who have said yes in the past. So they're on your mailing list. They're not regular financial partners, but they've at least made financial contribution before, or are sporadic in that level of partnership. They could or could not be regular prayer partners. Again, it continues to build the case, and there's a clear ask at the bottom of the first page. Would you prayerfully consider giving regularly to our ministry with Wycliffe? Then normally this is on the second page. In this context, they had a little bit more space, so it was moved up. But it affirms that they're joining a team that's already in progress. I think it's important to share this with your audience. Now, you're not starting from scratch. They already have 85% of the funds that they need. 67 families and 3 churches are already part of our prayer team. I think that's encouraging. People want to join a winning team, one that's already got some experience and time under their belt, so to speak. They need an additional 15% in monthly investments. And again, it repeats the question there at the bottom of the first page. Again, readers tend to look at headlines and then decide whether they're going to read deeper into the letter. And that's true whether it's something that they receive in the mail or even something they get via email or on their phones. The headline should catch their attention. And they may, in this case, they have something physical in their hands. They may set it down and say, well, I'll take a look at that Saturday morning when I have time, or at the end of the month when I go to fill out our charitable giving, make gifts to people. Again, it unpacks how their finances work. In this case, they have space for a personal picture. in this area right here. Now, in this case, remember in the first letter, there was no response card enclosed. That would be kind of an oxymoron. You don't want to say we're not asking you for financial partnership or additional financial partnership and then include a response card. That would, those do not sync. But in this case, you are making an ask for them to consider becoming a regular part of your team. And so this paragraph unpacks how they can respond. Enclosed with this letter is a response card, return envelope. That could be an ITP. It could be a prayer response card. It could be a bang tail. There's several different ways in which you could include a response mechanism. This is the required sentence to include in any type of communication that has requests with it. Please indicate preference for the Wycliffe ministry of your last name and your ministry number with your gift. If they want to give online, give them a way to do that. In our case, I inserted our specific link to our partnership ministry page in this spot, but you would have a different one, of course. And then indicate your commitment to them, what you're going to do in response. You want to build relationships, so we're going to continue to pray for you. We're going to communicate with you regularly. If you say that, please do it. We're going to keep you informed of what God is doing in us. And then commit yourselves to spend wisely and minister faithfully. I think good stewardship is one of the elements in which God provides faithfully to those who make that commitment and do that well. And then, again, our goal is to be at 100% by this date. Give us some sense of urgency. Please pray and respond as the Lord leads. In this case, this particular couple felt more comfortable kind of recapping here at the end instead of having it in a PS, but it kind of serves the same purpose. Always sign your letters in blue ink and sign them personally. Don't do it via a fancy font on the computer. People can tell the difference. Address it to individuals. Address it to dear John and Mary or Sam and Gladys. Again, based on relationship. If your relationship is a little more distant, it could be Mr. and Mrs., but always sign it personally in blue ink. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint presentation at this point, I think. Hold on just a second. So I just covered two of the three letters. The first one is not an appeal letter. It's an affirming request for prayer. But the second one is a renew or reconsider appeal letter. And in a moment here, we'll go to the next one. But there's a few things I want to reference before I get to the next letter. I think we have time. It's 2:30. We're doing good. All right. So there are some things to reflect on when you start making calls. We're probably going to have to do a separate webinar on making phone calls as follow-up to appeal letters being sent out, because I realize that to a lot of people this is very intimidating. It's probably the hardest thing they do is get on the phone and try to connect with people that maybe they haven't talked to in quite a while. Realize that the appeal letter is making the ask for you, and it really sets the stage for getting beyond and past that awkwardness that often comes up in phone calls, because you're like, how do I bridge the conversation from being authentic and genuinely interested with them and just catching up and being personal to, I want to now talk about our need to have additional partners or additional financial partnerships. Well, with the letter setting the stage and already presenting your need and stating your case and building upon that, making the ask very clearly for you, it's a lot easier in the follow-up phone calls to say, we're calling in follow-up to the letter that we sent about our ministry with. Certainly there's catch up personally. And a lot of times, if it's been a while and you're feeling a sense of guilt or even shame, the enemy loves to use those tools of deception to keep people from making calls. Again, get in the HOV lane and just confront that right up front. Hey, I know it's been a long time since we talked. Life and ministry is very busy, but I'd like to apologize for not connecting as frequently as maybe we should have. But we're at a critical juncture in our ministry with Wycliffe and felt strongly enough about our relationship that we wanted to include you in the invitation. No script. I have some talking points, and we'll share that here in a So there isn't a script. You don't want to come across as a multi-level marketing person or somebody, calling to get a contribution to the state troopers or whatever. It needs to be just authentic and casual and upbeat. And you're having a conversation with a friend, just like you're sitting at a Panera Bread talking over a table. Again, ask people how they would like to be communicated with and how often. It's a good time also to clarify personal information. Do you have a cell phone number? A lot of people have transitioned from landlines to cell phone numbers. Do you have the right email address? Do you have their video conference handle, as I call it? What birthdays and anniversaries do you need to make note of? It's a good time to casually and graciously ask for referrals. This is a good time to bring that up. Hey, we're at a point where maybe there's some folks that you'd be willing to do a ministry briefing in your home or host a dessert. And it's a great time to talk about advocacy. If you have some family members, friends, maybe a Sunday school class or church that you think would be interested in hearing about our Wycliffe ministry, it would be great if you could pass those on to us. You introduce us to them, we'll take it from there. You would not ask someone else to make the ask for you. I've actually had that conversation with one of my clients before. So one of the things that you want to do in the appeal letter is make a promise. Always keep it. So if you say you're going to follow up with a phone call, then you really need to do that, because the impression you'll leave if you don't is, oh, it must not have made any difference. This must not have been important. Paint a picture through your writing and use those pictures to describe the impact and the role that God's called you to in ministry. Offer proof and mean it. Now, what I mean by this is, here's the proof of the role that we're in. Computers are being repaired, and people in the field have the equipment and the technology, the software they need. In our role in PD, we're helping new members get to the field faster, and existing members have more financial health in their ministry. So whatever role you're in, there's some proof that you can offer, and again, it builds the case for participation on your team. Present a proposition, make an invite, make the ask, and make it personal. And really, in the follow-up call, what all you're asking to do is answer the question: would you prayerfully consider joining our ministry with Wycliffe? Then you make commitments to them. We'll keep you informed. We'll regularly pray for you and do that. Keep a prayer journal. Write them a note. Send them a text every now and then. Hey, praying for you today. Stay in contact with them. And we'll be honest with you about our trials and our triumphs. So I'm going to now go into the next letter. I think we have a few more minutes to do that. One moment. So here is an example of an actual appeal letter from a couple. You'll notice some similarities. This is just intended to get your creative juices flowing. Yes, there are some standards that I highly recommend. Keep the bolded headlines. Keep the ask at the bottom of the first page. Use the recommended branding and logo from Wycliffe. They did not want it to come across as if it's on Wycliffe letterhead. It's still a personal letter from you, but it does identify you as a Wycliffe missionary and member. So in this case, it is what I call a full meal deal appeal letter. In over 12 years of missionary service, the two of us have given our lives to minister to those that God has called us to. I won't read over the whole letter, don't worry. But in their case, they've been helping translation families in Quebec, Canada, and teaching at a school in Suriname. And then it begins, but we have important news. They're in transition, or they're needing to respond to this ministry budget increase. They need, a lot of people don't or a strong encouragement for people to be at 100% or above of their ministry budget. case it's a sample letter, make sure this question is at the bottom of the first page. I usually put over so it does indicate there's more on the back of this one-page document that you're sending. And if it's an attached PDF to an email, you don't have their mailing address. Believe me, it's not too much to read if it captures people's attention and keeps them engaged. Again, it's building a case up here at the top. They're joining a winning team, unfolds their financial breakdown. You're giving to a lasting work. Yes?
If you're meaning to show us your examples, we're not seeing them on the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was doing a screen share.
We're still seeing your slideshow.
Okay. I appreciate you cutting in like that. Let's. Sure. If I can get it up that way. How about now?
Yep, that works.
Okay, so I was just talking away there and didn't realize you could not see this sample. I won't go back up to the beginning again. The format is the same as I was describing before. Where I left off here was on what would be the second page, or you should print both sides of a response mechanism and even a personal picture or your prayer response card, some other piece, in addition to the letter. You have plenty of weight with a first-class stamp. In this case, there's enough space at the bottom of the page to include a personal picture. Again, always sign in blue ink. So this is an example. And the PD coaches have templates and examples of appeal letters. We're building a library. As I've been meeting with a variety of clients here at the JARS Center, primarily established members, I've been really impressed with their creativity and how they make it theirs. So what I ask when I share these examples with people is take them, look over it, set it down, come back in a day or two, pray over it, and begin to see how you can work your story and your particular circumstances into a letter like this, at least a similar format. I had one couple who were able to get their story onto one page. And as I read through it, it was still compelling, still had a clear ask, and I was fine with that. Most people need more space than just one 8.5 by 11 sheet on one side. For front and back, one page, in my opinion, I've been doing development work for over 20 years, is not too much space, especially if you break it up with some graphics and a picture and a compelling story. The text is still fairly tight, to the point. I receive some direct mail appeals that go on for pages and pages, and you probably have too. They're generally shorter sentences with a lot of bolding. I guess statistically they buy mailing lists and get a certain response. But this is a personal letter. That's why the paragraphs are indented. And I'm going to head back now to the PowerPoint because I want to recap some important items. Not sure why I have to keep saying it's from the beginning. But so appeal letters are unique. In PD, personal letters are received and viewed more personally than emails and newsletters. Do they work the same with everyone? No. Recognize that there are some millennial differences, some generational differences. With some people, you may not even have their mailing address because all you have is an email address or a text number. As you build relationship, acquire how you can communicate with them in that way, this may need to be an attachment to something that you send them. Now, can you get their attention, and will they sit down long enough to read through that? I hope so. Here's some ways in which appeal letters are unique, and I'll just share this in I think we have about 6 minutes left to go. They are casual and colloquial, meaning it's like having an informal conversation, just as if you were sitting across a dinner table with someone. It's personal, make it yours personally. I'm working with a couple in Dallas, and they said, it sounds too much like us. We want to talk more about God. We want to talk more about what He's doing. I said, fine. Have it come from your heart. It needs to be in a hand-addressed envelope, no labels, no metered mail, first class only. You shouldn't send out any more than what you can follow up with in a 2-week period. One piece of paper, front and back. It can be some stationery maybe that you've purchased that's a little nicer than just black ink on white paper. That's fine. I wouldn't make it so busy that it distracts from the main intent. Use the recommended pattern bar and Wycliffe logo. And again, I mentioned before Verdana. That's a Verdana. Of course, it's larger for the PowerPoint, or the Georgia font. This is 11 point and 12. It looks fine on a letter. There's flexibility in the text, not so much in the format. The headlines move the reader's eye down the page. I would recommend you do not remove headlines. There need to be so many along the way to keep people's interest drawn and take them down through the letter. Build your case, tell your story. That's the main thing through the context. You're not writing a short story or a novel. It's got to fit into a pretty short medium. But that's the challenge. Work with a PD coach, and they can help guide you through some examples and help edit and respond as if they were receiving it themselves to your particular writing and style. State God's calling and His gracious giftedness and talents in you. That's at the bottom of that first page. Don't be shy at saying, we've been in ministry for 20 years and we've served in these different places and God's really blessed, but we're at a point where we need to expand our partnership team. A clear, bold invitation at the bottom of the first page can be phrased in a number of ways. Use graphics, your picture, the pie chart about the financial breakdown. There might be some others that you like to use. Recently, a client I was working with read a passage from 2 Kings, I think it was, where it talked about he instructed them to dig ditches in a field, and without rain and without wind, he was going to fill those ditches with water so that they and their animals would have sustenance. They were on their way to battle. And they drew that out, and as additional partnerships were obtained, those ditches got filled with blue water. That was their way of sharing how momentum was being built. Indicate how to respond. Again, I'm repeating, but these are important things to remember in appeal letters that work. Sign in blue ink, and preferably your handwriting can be read. It's nice that it be legible. Use a PS at the bottom. Okay. As I suspected, I don't have a lot of time to spend on follow-up calls. I do have a document that will be included as a link to the FAQs, some talking points about how to do calls. They are a must. I know I had a client that sent out 420 letters in October, and they were thrilled with 6 responses. My question as a PD coach was, well, what about the 414 people that you didn't hear from? And there again are relationships to steward. How are they going to know, if you met your goal, or if God rewarded you with the people that you needed on your team? A case in point. So what I've seen oftentimes is people that follow this process of sending out batches, following up with them within a 2-week period. Before they send out another dozen or 20 or however many you can do in that time period, I'm seeing consistently people increasing their ministry budget, their gift income by anywhere from $400 to $600 a month. Particular couple that I just met with late last week, met with them twice, once in February, once in March, and they are now ready to head off to Indonesia, to Yajasi. And they were able to, using this and other presentations in local churches, partnering churches, obtain $800 in additional monthly support. So it's time for a Q&A. I hope I didn't talk too fast and ramble on for too much time. Pat Opal in Orlando will have assimilate your questions now and give them to me, and I'll respond.
Okay. Hey, Mike. How you doing? Good. Okay, thank you so much for this great information you gave us. And I have a couple questions here. They wanted to know, and I think you said it, but if you can kind of go over it again, are these samples of those letters available on Unity?
Right now, what we've discerned to do is have the samples with the PD coaches. So there's a separate section in Unity that only PD coaches have access to. We didn't want people just going out and taking the samples without instructions to go along with it on how to use them. So if you work with a PD coach, they can get you the samples. The instructions are on Unity under PD resources, but the actual letter samples are not so far.
Okay. And how about like the pie chart? That was a really cool looking pie chart that you used. Where can we get that at?
We started off with a pie chart that's in the It Takes a Team brochure, and with the new colors that came out, a couple of my creative clients rebuilt the pie chart, and I've started to use that. I'll tell you what, I'll send that to our host, Jen Woodrum, and she can post that under PD Share. And if you'll write me at Mike_Osborne without an E, OSBORN, at wycliffe.org, I can share it with you also.
Mike, we can also put that into the FAQ.
Yes. But people have come up with some really, a little bit more attractive and more legible pie charts. It's important that the individual words on those, I think, be legible. And you can play with the size and wrap text around it and make it a good, attractive part of your letter.
Okay. All right.
Good question.
And then another question that someone had, do you recommend printing the letters in color so the Wycliffe branding will be seen as intended?
Definitely. I would print them in color because you want that to stand out. You want the pie chart to stand out. If you put your personal picture in there, you want it to be in color. It needs to come across first class. If you do it black and white, it just doesn't have the same zap, the same punch. Take the time, a little bit of additional expense, and print them in color. And that's why I always just send things out. God, we have a first class God. And we built the temple. When he does things, he does it the best way he can, and I think we should follow suit.
Okay, right. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Oh, another question is someone just joined us, and they want to know if they will be able to be receiving a recording of this.
Yes, it is being recorded. And this is the first webinar I've done between 3 different locations. So I'm not exactly sure. Maybe Jen, you could speak into that. How does the person get to the link where the recording is?
Right now we're planning to share that in the FAQ document as well.
Okay, so the recorded link will be on the FAQ document. It should be out tomorrow. Give us a little grace. It may be Monday before we can get that out, but hopefully you'll be able to see that tomorrow.
And another question is, should we print their names? For example, should it say Dear Sam and Alice, or handwrite these in blue ink as well?
No, I would print their name. Let me tell you what comes across if you write in their names at the top and you sign at the bottom of the second page. What that says is, this is a mass letter. This was a bulk printing that they just filled our names in. But if you print it and you sign it and even put a little note on there, a little star somewhere, just show that you did this specifically for them. If they get any hint or any other impression that you printed off 30 of these and just filled in their name, it loses the impact of it being a personal invitation. Okay.
All right. Okay. And also, I asked this question about the example letters.
Yes.
They're not available yet, but is there any way that we can send people examples?
That you can.
And we can send them examples of the letters?
Yes, again, if you'll contact a PD coach or write partnership_development at wycliffe.org, a PD coach will be connected to you. Pat's there in Orlando. Jen is there in Dallas. I'm here in Waxhaw. Then we can show you different samples of these appeal letters. And again, it's just intended to kind of get your creative juices flowing, and you begin to see how your story can fit into this type of structure and format. But I give a lot of flexibility. I have a client who her campaign theme was, will you be a teammate with TEA capitalized, because she was going to be inviting people to sit down and have tea with her. because she was getting ready to go overseas, and having tea time is a good cultural connection thing. And she was invited, and she included a tea bag in with her letter. They're light, they're easy to mail, and she was inviting people to become teammates, if you understand what I'm saying. TEA and then M mates. So there's all kinds of creativity out there. Bridge to the future. You are the key. I had one client who bought about 500 little light aluminum keys on the internet, and his campaign theme was "You are the key," and he put a little key in with the letter. I've done "Be a Lifesaver." Put a lifesaver in with the letter. You too can be a lifesaver. The little mint candies. In our context, we were overseas living on a boat, and it was good to have lifesavers. And people in our audience got that. So make it unique and special.
And just one comment that I can address, and Nina asked where will the FAQ be found, and we're going to be emailing that out to everyone probably sometime tomorrow. So everybody will get an FAQ document with different kinds of links and other information.
And if you hear people that said, "Well, I really wanted to attend that, but I didn't. I had another meeting, or I was otherwise occupied. I know there's some things going on here at the JARS campus because there's a Spiritual Vitality Day tomorrow. People getting ready for that. Please encourage them to know that it was recorded, and they can listen to the link, and the PowerPoint will be there also, the examples, and they can receive similar information without the distraction of seeing my face and my voice. Any more questions? Looks like we did pretty good timing-wise. This last slide is something I picked up from, actually, I'll give credit to where credit's due. At a Bible dedication in Orlando, I think it came from Bob Creason. He was on stage, and he was talking about, toward the end of the Bible dedication, or at a stateside connection, I can't remember, and he made this statement: "We depend on God. We do it together with partners. There's biblical precedent for that, and we give it away." And that's God's word to those who need it in their heart language. And that's what PD is all about. It does take a team, and we have the privilege of inviting others to join us, and God receives the testimony, the praise, the blessing, the honor. And we know how the story ends in Revelation. People from every tribe, tongue, people, and nation at the banquet table having a party. So thanks for joining in.